combat COVID-19 community support. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a wonderful guest speaker, Kari Halverson, who's going to walk us through some mindfulness exercises to help us get through the COVID stress and uncertainty. But before we get started, just a little bit about us. My name's Dawn Creech, and I'm leading up this effort here in Central Oregon. And we're really an informal coalition of healthcare leaders and other community leaders working together to bring you a series of live stream events focused on how you can care for yourself and your family's health during the pandemic. And we're funded by the Central Oregon Health Council. We're going to dive right in, but very quickly before we get started, you should know that this event is provided for educational purposes only. It's not intended as medical advice or medical opinion. If you do have a mental health or physical health question, please contact your healthcare provider. All right, so if you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, you're going to have lots of opportunities to chime in on audience questions, and we really want you to participate today. So type your questions and comments into the chat box. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kari.
Great. Thank you, Dawn, for that wonderful introduction. I'm so honored and excited to be here with you all. I hope in my small way we can kind of offer something positive, and even though we're alone, we're together through this, and provide some hopefully beneficial skills for you all for combating COVID-19 related stress. So as we jump in, I just want to give a little bit of a background on what you can expect from today's presentation. We're going to be talking about why mindfulness. We're also going to talk about stress and the mind-body connection, as well as mindfulness as a stress management technique and examples of simple mindfulness skills. And then at the end, we'll be doing a mindfulness exercise for COVID-related stress. And I'm really excited to offer a bonus mindfulness resource guide, which will include easy skills and local resources to help you start using mindfulness today. I'll give you the way to get that mindfulness resource at the end of the presentation. So, Dawn, how are we doing as far as getting ready for participation?
Yeah, so we're still waiting for people to join us. So go ahead and then we'll come back to your question.
Okay, great. So like I said, in my small way, I hope my background kind of offers you all some beneficial skills, and a bit about why I'm here is that I'm really fortunate in that I grew up practicing mindfulness. I have over 20 years of experience with mindfulness, but anyone can start mindfulness at any time. So don't let that bother you or anything like that. I also did my honors thesis on mindfulness. I studied abroad in India and was fortunate enough to study in ashrams and different places like that. And I have my master's in mental health counseling, and I specialized in mindfulness. I studied under Dr. John Christopher, who studied under Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is kind of the founder of the MBSR groups, which is the mindfulness-based stress reduction groups. And I've facilitated a few MBSR groups, which are so much fun. People have been saying really great things about their experiences with mindfulness-based stress reduction groups. They have said it's truly been life-changing, that they've learned self-care is a necessity, even if it means only taking 5 to 10 minutes each day to reflect and reconnect. And this one person said, now when I get stressed out, I know that I have the tools I need to refocus my energy. And other people have said that MBSR has changed their relationship with themselves and how I live in the world. I am more in touch with my body, and I've learned to listen to what it's telling me. I've learned to slow down and really listen to people before reacting. That sounds like a good side effect of mindfulness. I've discovered my inner wisdom and have tools to manage stress and to fully appreciate each moment of my life. So how are we doing with our audience? Are we ready for our question here? Okay, so I'm just curious because the more we participate, the more we can kind of synchronize and create a learning experience together. So I'm curious, how many of you even know about mindfulness or have heard about mindfulness? So in the comment section, if you could let me know either 1 through 5, 1 being you don't know anything about mindfulness, and 5 being you know about mindfulness and you practice it, where you're at on that scale. So again, 1, I don't know anything about mindfulness. 5, I know about mindfulness and I practice it. 2 being I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is. 3, I think I have an idea, but I'm not entirely sure. And 4, I know about mindfulness, but maybe haven't necessarily practiced it.
All right, we're just waiting for some votes to come in from our audience members. We do have someone who voted a 3, and I think some of our other audience members are being a little bit shy. So we'll just wait a couple more minutes for some votes to come in.
Okay, great. Well, the person who wrote a 3, I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Hopefully we'll demystify some information about mindfulness and get some, maybe you'll gain some clarity. All right. Anyone else?
Yes, we have another audience member that said 4.
A 4. Okay. Know about mindfulness. So hopefully this will be a chance to learn more and get some ideas about how to practice it more. All right. So let's get moving here. Mindfulness isn't a rescue service in that it's not something that's an end all be all or something that's done to you. It's not a magic pill or silver bullet or a mystical mystery. It's not religious or just something that somebody on the mountaintops does or something like that. Instead, mindfulness is a vehicle for active learning and perceptual awareness. And what I mean by perceptual awareness, I mean dropping in and having more clarity about what's going on in your internal world, in your mind, in your body, as well as what's going on around you. And this can help build your current strengths and help you to have a more objective perspective to be able to do things to help improve your health or well-being. So, why mindfulness? And I'll go back to defining mindfulness even more. But why are we even having a presentation on mindfulness in the first place? Well, over 250 mindfulness based stress reduction programs are in major US medical centers today. And it's correlated with decreasing symptoms of anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, chronic pain, depression, and addiction. And it's correlated with increased sense of empathy, spirituality, sense of well-being, neuroplasticity. And what neuroplasticity is being able to change and rewire the brain. And this is so important because it helps us learn how to have different ways of thinking about situations that can impact how we react to situations, so we can have more positive stories about situations or experiences. And mindfulness is also highly correlated with integrative functions of the prefrontal cortex of the brain. The prefrontal cortex of the brain has mirror neurons. These are our empathy neurons that help us have empathy for other people and to have more positive social engagements with people. And also, mindfulness helps us self-regulate, which is primarily what we're going to be talking about, how to regulate our mind as well as our sympathetic nervous system, that stress response during times of stress, like we're all experiencing right now during the COVID pandemic. So what does this have to do with you? Have any of you experienced, if you feel comfortable answering this, and I'd be surprised if no one hasn't experienced any of these things, stress, worry, obsession, or unwanted thoughts, difficulty controlling the worry or rumination of thoughts, restlessness or feeling keyed up or on edge, being easily fatigued, difficult concentrating, or the mind going blank, irritability, anger, resentment, muscle tension, sleep disturbances, maybe difficulty going to sleep or waking up in the middle of the night or feeling tired when you wake up, powerlessness, hopelessness, poor self-esteem, or even high blood pressure, headaches, indigestion, ulcers, or other physical ailments, or just experiencing stressors. So yeah, who can relate with any of those things? Are there any comments about just how people are experiencing stress at this time, Dawn?
Not from our audience members, but I can certainly say that I have experienced those. Oh, and we do have a couple audience members now saying, yep, yep, totally.
Yep. So this is why mindfulness is so important. So please don't get overwhelmed by this chart, but I wanted to give a little bit of a visual of what happens when we're stressed. So as you can see in this green zone here, this is kind of like where we feel in our parasympathetic system or a relaxed state, where we feel kind of joy or grounded, or we just feel a sense of peace or balance, equanimity, and we feel like we can enjoy life. And this is where we want to be most of the time, right? Where we just feel balanced and a sense of like we can have a sense of control in our lives. What happens when we experience a stressor, and it can be real or imagined, um, is that our adrenaline and our body is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol and things like that. And this is what creates the fight, flight, or freeze response. How many of you have heard of the fight, flight, or freeze response in the comment section? Let us know if you've experienced that. So we need this response, because if our life is in danger, if there is a wild animal attacking us, we need our cortisol and our stress hormones to flood our body so that we can either fight, flee, or freeze. We can respond, we can survive these things. And so this is a survival mechanism that our body has within us and we very much need. The problem is if we have a stressor that is ongoing, like emotional stress that a lot of us experience at work or in our relationships, and now with COVID, that is just going on, is that our adrenaline is still spiked for long periods of time. And so we're in this stress response for long periods of time. And that can be correlated with having these panic or escalated emotions such as panic, fear, anxiety, worry and concern, rage, anger, irritation, frustration, or at higher levels, those hopelessness, depression, numbness, dissociated, shame, feeling kind of shut down. And also, all of that stress flooding through our bodies can be correlated with the onset or worsening of disease as well. So, being able to manage our stress is so important for our mental health as well as our physical health, because the mind and the body are interconnected. And mindfulness helps us be able to stay in that kind of relaxation state longer, so it can be preventative, as well as when we are aroused and start having that stress response, we're able to tolerate it better and or de-escalate that response faster. And so that's why mindfulness is so popular right now and so effective. And there's just so much research on the validity of mindfulness as a skill of really working with stress and anxiety. So I'm curious to hear from you. In which situations can you be mindful? Can you be mindful in picture number A, doing the dishes? Can you be mindful in picture number 2, stretching, gentle yoga? Can you be mindful in picture number C, walking the dog? I'm just curious, where do you think you can be mindful?
All right, so the audience is on a little bit of a delay, so we'll give them just a few seconds to get their votes in. We do have one audience member that said that he thinks you can do it in all three. Okay. Another audience member voted B, so in the yoga, which that looks really good right now.
Yeah. So we got one that says all three. We got one that says in B, the gentle stretching or yoga.
Yep, so that's the votes we have for now.
Okay. So I'm curious, from the one who said all three, or do you want to respond or elaborate why you think all three?
All right, we'll give that person a chance to respond.
Okay. Yeah.
We did get another vote for the yoga.
For the yoga.
All right. Matt says it seems that you can just do it in a state of mind. You can just be as you walk.
Wow. Be as you walk.
Walk.
Yes. Yeah, and that is absolutely right. You can do mindfulness anywhere and everywhere at any time. And mindfulness is simply focusing your attention on the present moment. Simple, but sometimes more difficult to actually do. For those of you who said C, I'm curious why did, or B, excuse me, I'm curious why were you thinking B?
All right. So we had a couple more viewer comments. Someone saying mindful on meals and walking. And then one of our viewers, Amanda, said, I'll add C as well. My pets allow me to be mindful with a smiley face. So I think people are thinking about it a little bit more since you've been saying that. I know me, when I think of being mindful, I do think of when I do yoga because that's probably the only time I'm being super mindful. So I love the chance to get to learn ways to bring that to other parts. Oh, yeah, we had a viewer who just said no distractions during yoga.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's no distractions during yoga. It can be kind of more of a formal practice of practicing mindfulness. And we'll get more to that as well, the sort of the difference between formal and informal. So, in a way, both of you were right. The person who said all three, because that's sort of the end all be all goal, right? Is to be more mindful in each moment, living mindfulness. And yet we do, quote, formal mindfulness exercises to sort of help us build that muscle so that we're more likely to actually be mindful in each moment. And stretching, gentle stretching, or yoga can be an exercise, a formal exercise of mindfulness. And I want to say that for whomever said that there are no distractions when doing yoga, that seems like good mindfulness or awareness of what helps you be mindful too. So Mother Teresa said this quote. So here are some quotes on mindfulness. Be happy in the moment. That's enough. And then Thich Nhat Hanh said, feelings come and go like the clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor. And Rumi said, look past your thoughts so you may drink the pure nectar of this moment. So why are we practicing mindfulness? Because we want to start cultivating mindfulness traits. And mindfulness traits are the tendency to be aware of present moment experience, to have an open stance towards oneself and others, to have emotional equanimity or a sense of balance and serenity, and be able to describe the inner world of our mind. So we're able to kind of take that objective stance, especially imagine if we're in that hyper arousal state. Mindfulness can help us take a stance back for a moment and be able to name it and have kind of more of a sense of power and control over our feelings. So Siegel explains it this way, and he's one of the leading neuroscientists on mindfulness, is individuals with mindfulness traits, naming an emotion can decrease the limbic activation or the stress response that we talked about earlier. In other words, they can name it to tame it. So do we have any questions so far? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the 7 attitudes or factors of a mindfulness practice. And I'm just going to go over this really briefly because this is a shorter presentation. We could go into all of these for much longer. But one of the first things about like attitude that you might want to think about when practicing mindfulness is cultivating non-judgment. And what we mean by non-judgment is how many of us uh, are constantly judging ourselves in our mind. We might be trying to take a moment to drop in, be quiet, and then we're thinking to ourselves, "Oh, I can't do this," or "This is so hard," or we kind of have that inner critic, or we judge other people. Sometimes we're um, judge other people for this or that. And so a practice of mindfulness is not judging the judgment or anything like that, but simply noticing when we have that inner critic, and all of a sudden noticing it and then circling our attention back to our experience. So cultivating non-judgment, learning how to step back from reacting. Then having patience, because mindfulness is sort of a lifelong journey. I don't think we ever fully master mindfulness, even though it's something that's simple. It's something that we need to keep practicing. And then number 3 is a beginner's mind. And what that means is simply having a mind that's willing to see everything as if it's the first time. So an example of that might be if you knew somebody 20 years ago, and you had these thoughts of them as X, Y, and Z, and then you meet them again today, and you kind of color your experience of them and your thoughts of them with those same thoughts from 20 years ago. So a beginner's mind would be like, let me remove those lenses and actually experience this person as if it's a new day, and I'm really experiencing this person for who they are. Or with ourselves, like I might have a habit of X, Y, or Z, but today is a new day, and I'm going to check in with my body and my inner world and my mind as if it's a new day. Trusting the process of life, and having a basic trust in your own feelings, and kind of just trusting your own intuition, your own gut, and trusting whatever arises. So just knowing that there's wisdom within all of our different experiences. This can be a difficult one, right? I think I was reflecting on what causes anxiety, and I came to believe that a lot of anxiety just comes from lack of trusting the future or the process of life, right? There's a fear of it. There's a fear of an uncertainty, and there's nothing to be ashamed of that. And yet, if we can learn how to have non-judgment of that experience and then just trust ourselves, and that we'll know what to do in the right moment and then the right time, that could maybe really help. Number 5 is non-striving. Now, this one might seem paradoxical in nature almost for us in our culture. Our culture is so much about doing and striving and achieving, yet mindfulness almost encourages us to do the opposite. It encourages us to take a step back and just be in the moment and notice what's arising in each moment, what's arising with our quality of our thoughts, what's arising in our body, what's happening around us. And then from there, then we can move forward and proceed, and in some ways even be more productive rather than if we're just wound up all the time. Number 6 is acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean that we tolerate different things or prejudice or discrimination or things that are against our values. It simply means, and I'm going to read this from Full Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat-Zinn. He's kind of one of the founders of the science and the research behind the mindfulness movement. He wrote, "Acceptance as we are, speaking of it simply means that you have come around to a willingness to see things as they are. This attitude sets the stage for acting appropriately in your life, no matter what is happening. You are much more likely to know what to do and have the inner conviction to act when you have a clear picture of what it is actually happening than when your vision is clouded by your mind's self-serving judgments and desires and or fears or prejudices." And then number 7 is letting go. So the best way I can think of describing this is that in India, there's a clever way of catching monkeys where they would take coconuts and drill a hole in the coconut and put a banana inside the coconut. And then the monkeys would put their hands in and grab the banana, but they would not let go of the banana and they would get their hands stuck in the coconut. And so, in the same way, how many of us kind of grab onto an idea and we don't want to let go of that idea, but all we need to do is let go of that idea and we can kind of get out of that suffering or that stress. So, that's kind of a fun analogy. And then, plus, a lot of commitment, self discipline, and intentionality is also required with a mindfulness practice. To me, it's almost like brushing our teeth. It's something we almost need to do daily, even if it's just 5 minutes of like a 5 minute check in. So, how do we practice mindfulness? You can think of this: stop. Take a moment and literally just stop wherever you're at. Take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth, and just observe. Observe what's happening in your mind, in your body, noticing if there's any body sensations, like maybe your chest is racing, or there's something going on in your stomach, or you have an ache or a pain, or maybe observing around you, and then proceed. It can be as simple as that. It's just taking a moment. And breath in particular can be a very powerful mindfulness exercise, because if you remember that diagram from earlier, breathing can actually help us flood our body with oxygen and help lower our stress response from that hyperarousal, the sympathetic nervous system, move into the parasympathetic. So breath is one of the most powerful yet simple things that we can all do to help with stress. So some examples of formal practices that we can do to practice and cultivate mindfulness. And again, formal practices are sort of like going to the gym, building our mindfulness muscles so that we can learn how to be more mindful in our day-to-day lives, but can be eating. In our mindfulness-based stress reduction groups, the first thing that participants do is they take a raisin. They're all given a raisin, and they then look at the raisin and just take a moment and really look at the raisin. Like, what is the color of this raisin? Looking at the wrinkles. What does it feel like in the fingers? And just really slowing down, and then maybe kind of smelling it, and then maybe even putting it in the mouth and taking a little nibble and noticing what it feels like in the mouth, the texture, the flavor, what the saliva is doing, what the mouth is. And inevitably, it's like the best tasting raisin one has ever had. It's amazing how really slowing down and having that mindfulness or that perceptual awareness about eating can make eating so much more enjoyable and flavorful. Walking can be also a mindfulness exercise, really slowing down and taking one step and noticing what it feels like to have the heel hit the floor, and then the toes touch the floor, and then slowly lifting the next leg and feeling that, and then feeling the wind on the skin, and just really dropping into the body. Several of you already said, stretching and yoga, how there aren't a lot of distractions, and that can be a good way to drop into the body. Meditation, usually when people think of mindfulness, they automatically think of meditation. Meditation is simply sitting still and circling your attention back to your breath and back to your body over and over again. Visualization, so like guided imagery, thinking about maybe a space, like Dawn, if I can use you as an example, maybe thinking about what it was like being in Florida under the palm trees and soaking up the sun and feeling the wind and the birds chirping, thinking of a happy place. Then that can help calm the nervous system as well. listening to calming music or the sounds of nature. You could listen to music or even just go outside and listen to the birds chirping. Focusing on the breath, intentionally breathing more fully. Another example of a formal mindfulness exercise can be doing a body scan. Body scan means checking in, going systematically from each part of your body and just like, okay, what does it feel like in my head? What do my eyes feel like? My mouth, my ears, my throat, my chest, and just scanning the whole body just to systematically check in, see where you're at. And again, without that judgment of trying or striving of trying to change it or being critical of where you're at, it's just simply noticing, being that active observer. Another, yes, Dawn, you have a question there?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, Kari, but we do have a couple questions from the audience members. Do you want to take those now, or do you want to wait?
Sure, we can take those now.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so one of our audience members is saying, do you have any tips to totally step back? Seems like I get caught in the moment.
I bet all of us do from time to time, right? Part of the human experience. Thank you for that great question. Yeah, so when I have a question for you, when you get caught up in those moments, what's the quality of your thoughts like?
Okay, we'll give that viewer a few moments to respond. And then I'll go ahead and put out the next question that we have from a viewer, which is, she says, working at the hospital, I have to spend many hours wearing a medical mask. How can I help with breathing exercises during these stressful times? So I don't know if you have any ideas for that viewer. As well. So far, we haven't gotten a response from the other viewer. So if you want to just dive into that next question, we'll go from there.
Okay, sure. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for your service in the hospital. It's greatly appreciated at this time. So breathing as deeply might not be an option, which is a really interesting thought, right? With the COVID being a breathing thing, right? My thought for you might be doing some of this progressive muscle relaxation. So it could be as simple as, when you're noticing like that you're feeling activated or stressed or triggered or the mind's racing or you're feeling flooded in your body, maybe even just taking your hands if you can and holding them really tight for a second and squeezing them and then releasing and then squeezing and releasing, and kind of just notice if that helps relieve some of the tension in your body. You can also do it by bringing your shoulders up. That might be more something you can't do in front of people, and then bring them down. So that's why the hand thing, even just really quickly holding them tight, might be another quick sort of de-escalation technique. And also even maybe just noticing, like, what is it like to not be able to breathe as deeply right now? As long as that's not triggering for you too. Like, oh, like, what is it like having this mask? Oh, it hurts around my ears or whatever. And just being an active observer of whatever's coming up for you. And identifying that sensation and that emotion. And also maybe even, if you're having to work, put in charts or IVs or whatever it is, just slowing down and really noticing what it feels like to be in that moment. So it reminds me, my mom was an incredible basketball player back before Title IX and all of that. And she tells me stories often about how when she used to be on the court, right, and she would get in the zone, right? She would be dribbling and doing layups and moving around people, and she wouldn't even be thinking about what she's doing. She'd be so in the zone, so in the flow. And that's an example of mindfulness in a way, is that it's so like in the flow and really in the body and in the presence of what's going on, that it's not as stressful and it's enjoyable and you're not striving, right? It's not as much effort. It's just being in that flow. And so I wonder if there's a way in your work where you can kind of even use your work as a mindfulness opportunity to kind of be more in that zone, more in that flow and work. So that was kind of a long answer. I apologize if that was too long of an answer, but I hope that was helpful for you.
Yeah, we did get a comment from that viewer that said, "Never thought to do that. Thanks. I will definitely utilize these techniques."
Great. So glad to hear about that. So going back to the person who said I was talking about a lot of the rumination, did they respond? And if not, I can kind of address some things too.
Yeah, I think you were asking what their state of mind was when they get caught in the moment. And he responded, "That is a really good point. It strikes a chord and it is usually really bad."
It starts when?
It strikes a chord and is usually really bad. I think what you were saying struck a chord with him.
Mm, okay. Yeah, so that's good. That's an example of being mindful is even knowing what strikes our chords, what our triggers are. And then again, having that non judgment, not criticizing ourselves, and simply being an observer and taking inventory, taking data. So, if there's certain triggers, um, that okay, so what can you do with that? Are there different situations that you can put yourself in? I mean, I really don't know your specific situation, but also like, can you breathe? Even practice breathing before that chord is struck, kind of a thing. And just notice, kind of how the thoughts trigger the anxiety or the rumination or whatever that pattern is, and then seeing if you can bring mindfulness into that to kind of um, change up that pattern, that sequential pattern of the chord being struck, then the thoughts, and then the anxiety. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. Are there any other questions, Don? Okay. Um, we can also use mindfulness in our, communication. Qigong is just a movement meditation. So it's like moving, slowly moving and noticing what it feels like to be in our body. And then also we can use mindfulness in our communication and in our relationships. So just, oh, when I say this word or I speak this way, how does that feel for me to say that, or how might that impact other people around me? And it's amazing how when we practice mindfulness in our relationships and our communication, it can help with resolution and more intimacy and connection with those around us as well. So that's kind of just something I threw in there. So yeah, any other questions about different practices around mindfulness? Okay, so how does it feel, Don? What do you think? Should we move on to doing a mindfulness exercise for dealing with world stress at this moment?
I think that sounds exactly like what we all need. I would love that. Let's do it.
Okay, yeah, because it's like we can talk about mindfulness all day, but maybe we just need to experience it since it's an experiential thing. So, if it feels comfortable for you, I just invite you to sit straight, kind of straighten your spine, get into a comfortable place, move around, do whatever you need to do so that you can kind of be still for a few minutes. And it's okay if this experience feels awkward or weird or even funny. If you want to laugh, that's all okay. We don't need to be judgmental. And in fact, even laughing at something and having a sense of humor can be good for stress reduction, which ultimately this is the whole point, is stress reduction, relaxation. But maybe just give it a shot, see how it goes if that feels good to you. So if once you're comfortable, go ahead, and if it feels good to you, I invite you to close your eyes just to eliminate any distractions. And then go ahead and take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And in through the nose and out through the mouth. And if you have a thought or distraction, No matter what it is, simply have that thought or distraction, and with non-judgment, notice it, and then circle your attention back to your breath. Notice what it feels like to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. In through the nose and out through the mouth. Maybe notice what it feels like feeling the air on the top of your lip and going in through your nostrils. And what it feels like with your stomach and your diaphragm moving up and down. And again, circle your attention back to your breath. In through the nose. And trace with your attention, your breath going all the way down into the lungs. And notice how the diaphragm moves in the stomach. And then follow the exhale. One more time, deep in through the nose. And out through the mouth. And again, if you have a thought or distraction, simply notice it and circle your attention back to your body. Now I invite you, without trying to change anything, to simply notice what it feels like to be in your body in this very moment right now. Notice if it feels different or if it feels good, or maybe there are aches and pains or discomfort. Whatever it may be, without trying to change it, just simply notice and draw your attention to it with a curious mind, with a beginner's mind, as if you're experiencing it for the first time. And simply notice what it's like to be in your body. And again, if you have a thought or distraction, without criticism, notice that thought or distraction, then circle your attention back to being inside your body. Breathing in and out. And at this time, if it feels good to you, I invite you to continue to stay in your body and with your eyes closed. And I'm going to ask a series of questions. And I invite you to just tune into your inner world to see what your reaction is to these questions. Your first reaction. Again, without trying to change it or overthink it, just simply notice as that active observer what comes up for you. So I invite you to reflect on or just notice what first pops up for you when you think about how you use television or social media. And what comes up for you in your body? What do you feel when you think about being on social media or television right now? How do you feel afterwards? How often do you watch TV or engage with social media? And what is the state of mind that it brings you to turn it on in the first place? And what is the state of mind that brings you to turn it off? What are the effects of watching the news or the social media on your body and on your psyche and on your emotional state? And simply notice any feelings that arise in the face of this pandemic. Now I invite you, if it feels good to you, to try to identify specific issues that you care about. If you worked on, might help you feel more engaged and more powerful. Just doing something, even if it is, quote, very little, can often help you feel as if you can have an effect, that your actions count, and that you're connected to the greater world in meaningful ways. You might be able to feel effective if you identify an important health, safety, or an environmental issue in your neighborhood or town or city, perhaps to raise other people's consciousness, awareness, or education of a potential problem or to alleviate one that has already been identified. Maybe it has to do with COVID. Since you are part of the larger whole, it can be inwardly healing to take some responsibility for outward healing in the world. Remember the quote, think globally, act locally. It works the other way around too. Think locally, act globally. So those are just some thoughts. Go ahead and breathe in and out and notice how that feels. These are all just invitations, and I encourage you to remember to trust yourself and your inner knowing above all else. And again, go ahead and take a few deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. 2 more. Deep in through the nose, out through the mouth. 1 more. In through the nose. And exhale, really just release any tension on the exhale. And then I invite you to bring up your shoulders up to your ears as much as you can, getting as tight as you can. And then exhaling, letting them down really hard. And then up with the inhale, bringing them up as tight as you can. And then exhale, really release them. Drop them down. And 1 more time. Inhale. And exhale. And then go ahead, if it feels good, gently shake your hands, wiggle your toes, your fingers, stretch. Whatever you need to do to fully reorient to the room. To become fully present to this meeting right now, right here. Welcome back. How was that for you all? I'm curious to hear in the comment sections.
Well, Kari, thank you for that. I know I certainly needed it. I was noting how hard it was to keep my thoughts from going all over the place. Um, some important things, some not important things. So I would imagine this is something that you get better at the more you practice it, in keeping your thoughts kind of under control. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Dawn. I think, well, you brought up several things. One is it does get easier over time, absolutely. And that's why we practice it with what I was calling the formal exercises, because it's just like if you've never run a marathon before and you all of a sudden just jump in and run a marathon, it's going to be really difficult. But if you're training a little bit every day, then you're ready and you're prepared. So, just like we might not experience a pandemic every day or all these incredible stressors every day, but if we're working on our nervous system and practicing mindfulness every day, then when it does happen, it becomes easier and we can master our mind and, have that ability to focus inwardly more and more easily with time. So it is something that takes a lot of practice, a lot of commitment, and but yet just a little bit every day, like 5 minutes every day, can make a big difference too. So that's one point I'm getting from that. And the other point is that the point of mindfulness isn't to be perfect at it either. I think we all kind of struggle from time to time, and sometimes our quality of mindfulness can change day to day. So sometimes, for instance, I've been practicing mindfulness pretty much for over 20 years now, and sometimes it's really easy for me, and I can just drop in, and it feels so good. And other times it's just a struggle, and I still feel anxiety and experience those things too. So it takes a lot of practice, and yet the point isn't to be perfect at it. In fact, mindfulness can even be noticing, I'm having a hard time being mindful right now. Like that's being mindful in a way, being aware of the fact that it's maybe challenging. And then we can ask ourselves, well, why is it a little challenging for me right now? Is it because maybe I have this deadline going on? Or, maybe it's because I'm ramped up right now because I'm giving a presentation, or maybe it's, well, there's just quite a few different stressors going on. And then it's like, okay, well, what can I do? And maybe what we can do about it is then work on that checklist, or maybe we need a moment and we can trust ourselves to keep working on dropping in more and more and give ourselves permission that it's okay to keep dropping in and more. So there's a lot of variance with mindfulness, and mindfulness really is just becoming aware of what we are experiencing, even if it is hard to drop in.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple more comments from our viewers. Um, so I think this is when you were actually taking us through the mindfulness exercise. One of our viewers commented that she feels anxiety after watching the news. So I would imagine the first step is just even identifying that you're feeling that. And then the second step is doing some of the skills, whether it's breathing or you know, squeezing and relaxing your hands to try to deal with that anxiety. We also had a viewer who said that she felt compelled to respond to the during the exercise to her thoughts and feelings that were coming up, and she was glad to hear that it does get easier. Thank you, she said.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Um, yes, it gets easier, and we learn how to even have tolerance of our own inner world and experiences through mindfulness. And for that person who responded about the news, thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of us experience that heightened anxiety around the news, especially right now. And so mindfulness doesn't tell us what to do with it. No one can tell us what to do with it. That's your personal choice, but it can help inform you. So I'm curious, with that kind of deeper understanding of your experience around what happens for you when you watch the news, what do you think you're going to do with that new information? You can either answer if that feels good to you, or it can just be rhetorical. That's fine too.
All right. So we're on a little bit of a delay. So we'll see if that viewer feels compelled to respond or not. But Kari, thank you so much for all the great information about mindfulness and leading us through that mindfulness exercise. I know it was really helpful. I think I'm ready to start my weekend. Is it Friday yet?
Almost.
After going through that, I feel strangely headed to the weekend. Not quite there yet, but it's definitely going to help me make it through my day. So I hope our viewers as well. We did get a comment from that viewer who said that she's going to focus on her breathing and inner peace when she feels that anxiety. So, all right. Well, thanks again for being with us here today. Remember that all of our live events are recorded and available on Facebook and YouTube. I also know that Kari actually might have something that she wants to mention about a resource for you. So did you want to talk about that for just a moment?
Sure. Yeah. So I want to thank everyone for being here. It's so wonderful to have this experience with you and to connect with you distance wise. And Dawn, thank you for having me here with you. And so, as a thank you for all of us being here and in the spirit of hopefully helping you, I do have a free mindfulness resource guide that includes different, books, videos, exercise, as well as local resources in Ben, Redmond, and Sisters, as far as places that you can go to start to learn mindfulness more. And to get that resource guide on mindfulness, you can simply email me at Kari@awakeningtothrive.com. That's Kari, Kari, at awakeningtothrive.com, all spelled out.
Well, thank you so much for that. That's a great free gift for our viewers. So thanks for your generosity there, Kari. All right, everyone, we're going to wrap up. Please join us next week for additional live events. On Monday, we're having our first live event in Spanish. It's all about kids and COVID with Dr. John Peoples from Central Oregon Pediatric Associates. So if you have Spanish-speaking friends or relatives, please let them know of that event, as well as all the rest of our live events coming at you next week. So thank you so much. And also thank you to our production partner, Matt, at Hand in Hand Productions. We couldn't do this without him. And we wish you all a wonderful rest of your day.